And hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Jake Hicks Show and our candidate profile series. And today I have on Mr. Wayne Rogers.
How you doing,
Uh,
Jake? Good to see you, man.
Good to see you, Wayne. And Wayne is running for Secretary of State here in
That's right.
Alabama. And I'm going to let Wayne tell us a little about his background and why he is running.
Absolutely, Jake. I'm running for Secretary of State because there's two main things Secretary of State does. I mean, they do a lot of things, but firstly, and most importantly for the viewers out there, is they run elections. I mean, they're in charge of elections across the state, all 67 counties, state elections, municipal elections. The Secretary of State has a lot to do with all of them. And the second thing they do is they work with small businesses in Alabama. So, Jake, I spent over 30 years practicing law in Alabama from 1988 until 2019 when I joined the sheriff's office, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But for about 30 years, I mostly represented small businesses around the state of Alabama. Those 67 Alabama counties, I have appeared in court on behalf of an Alabama small business in 66 of them. And if you ever need me in Lamar County, Jake, just call me because I need to hit that last one. But so Vernon, Alabama, I've been to Vernon plenty of times. I just haven't appeared in court there. But in all 66 other counties, I mostly represented Alabama small business, which is a big thing Secretary of State does. For the last 6 years, 6.5 years really, I've been working as executive assistant to Sheriff Mark Petway, the first African American sheriff in the history of Jefferson County. And I have been representative liaison to the election commission here in Jefferson County for a lot of that time. I've worked elections from the inside, from the outside, know a lot about elections, election law, how you can cheat, how you can stop people from cheating, and a whole lot about the election system, our voter registration system. Got some good ideas I think we'll talk about certainly more during the interview later on about how we need to make it easier for people to vote, Jake. We make it too hard, and we keep our turnout low. And the state of Alabama has sort of intentionally kept turnout low for a long time. And I've got some ideas that I think could increase our voter turnout by as much as 20%, take us from low 60s to at least the low 80s and maybe even better.
That is certainly true. We have one of the lowest turnouts in the country, and
That's right.
and we
Always.
always have.
Always.
Um, as you mentioned, the Secretary of State has a wide range of responsibility.
Yep.
And over the past few years, those responsibilities have increased.
Hmm.
Do you believe that the office has the adequate resources to carry out the duties assigned to it by the legislature?
So what I'm going to say then in answer to that general question is tough. There's the adequate resources. I would say probably not. And I'll tell you one thing that I have realized, Shaco, just really since the August elections, I got in my capacity at the sheriff's office, I got a number of calls and complaints and problems over the municipal elections here in Jefferson County. The Secretary of State's office they oversee municipal elections, the same way. They do a lot of work with that. And they provided very little training this year to municipal clerks and municipal poll workers. It's not the same poll workers that you have for county elections and state elections. It's different people. And the city clerks are in charge of these. In Jefferson County, we have 32 municipalities that conducted municipal elections back in August. Of those 32 municipalities, 26 of them had a city clerk that had never conducted an election before. And yet they got very little training from the Secretary of State's office on how to run those elections. And we ended up with 7 of them in court the day after the election because of various things that went wrong with their elections. So I would say, certainly the office needs more resources to do the many things that they're given to do. Another big thing they do, Jake, is they have to certify everything the state does. The Secretary of State's office certifies what the governor does, what the legislature does. And there's a lot of work to check in those certifications, making sure all our records are accurate, because the Secretary of State is the person who maintains records for the state of Alabama.
That is true. And also, one of the things you mentioned about the Secretary of State's office is they moved the dates of municipal elections
Yep.
in 2020 from 2024 to
To
25.
2025. That's right. So it's
So
been 5 years. That's why there were so many new clerks. It's been 5 years, and city clerks tend to change out a good bit. And so the city clerks, the majority of the city clerks across the state had never run an election before because it had been 5 years.
that's true. And I do not understand the reasoning behind moving the municipal elections.
Well, I will say there was 2 real reasons for it, Jake. One was COVID. because the bill was passed right after COVID, and they were like, basically that first year, people got elected during COVID because it was August of 2020, and so they said, well, we're just going to say those people effectively started their terms in August of 2021. But I will say I was an advocate for doing this because what it does is it means municipal elections get a focus of their own that they really didn't get before. Because if you think about 2020, that August 2020 election, that's 3 months before presidential election when Joe Biden got elected. And now the municipal elections get much more focus on themselves because they're the August after. Now, do I think they need to be held in August? I do not. I was advocating for holding them in November, a full year after the presidential election. So that way the cycle then would be a presidential election, the following year municipal election, the following year gubernatorial election, and all the legislature and the lieutenant governor, attorney general, and all those that we're going to have in 26. And then the fourth year of that cycle, you would get a little bit of a down year where you would only have specials gearing back up for the presidential when the whole thing would start over again. Does that make sense?
That does, and that actually is a good ideal that I wish we could see implemented.
Yeah.
Alabama is one of only 3 states in this country that doesn't offer early voting. Would you, as Secretary of State, push the legislature to pass early voting?
Been doing it, even not being Secretary of State, Jay. I know a number of legislators, they're friends of mine, and I push them, we need to have early voting. Now, interestingly, we have absentee voting. Now, absentee voting and early voting are not the same thing. But one of the more interesting twists to it is Alabama's absentee voting rules actually allow you to start absentee voting a full 6 weeks before the election is conducted. And a lot of states don't allow early voting until 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month out. We actually have a 6-week period. What I would advocate for, Jake, is we expand the absentee voting system that we already have, this is something most people don't know, Jake. We already hire people to run this system. Okay. The Jefferson County where I live, we spend a lot of money hiring people to run the absentee voting system because unbeknownst to probably 90% of your viewers, you can vote absentee in person. And I'm a big advocate of that. Now, mail-in voting, I think it's safe, it's good. We want to do it. We'll talk about that at a different time. But in-person absentee voting is actually the best way to vote. You go up to the clerk's office, whatever, every county clerk is required by law to have people ready to take your absentee ballot 6 weeks before the election is conducted, anytime from 8:30 to 4:30, every day the courthouse is open. They have to do that. Now, I would advocate, and the Secretary of State did this in 2020, Jake. They let some Saturdays where the courthouses had to be open and people could come in and vote on Saturdays. And they did what was called no excuse absentee voting because it was COVID. Well, why couldn't we have no excuse absentee voting all the time? Secretary of State exercised their authority to do it in 2020. Why couldn't you do it now? Just say, anybody wants to absentee vote? I'm not going to ask for an excuse. You just come in and absentee vote, and let's just have some hours where you can do it. We've already got people hired. They're already sitting there, and they're very good at what they do. I have voted, because of the absentee rules, I have voted absentee in person for the last several cycles, because the rule is this: if you're expected to work more than 10 hours on election day, you can vote absentee. That's one of the excuses that are allowed right now. And I'm always going to be working more than 10 hours on election day. I'm going to be working 20 or 22 or 26 hours on election day. So, because we're conducting the election. So I just go early and vote absentee, and it goes right through. It takes about 10 minutes and you're done. And that's what I would advocate for.
I have participated in the in-person absentee voting in 2020 and then 22.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it was perfect. I got to vote for Joe Biden at the end of September, and I voted for the Democratic candidates that were available in September 22.
Yeah, it's a great system, and we just need to expand it.
Yes, definitely so. And we have a great circuit clerk here in Jackson County. So
yeah, same here in Jefferson County. 2 of them actually. We got one in Bessemer, one in Birmingham. So
Alabama is one of only 3 states. Oh, sorry. No, sorry. I was rereading.
That's all right. No. And we ought to make that number 2. That number ought to be 0. You don't know the truth. Go ahead.
Alabama is typically referred to as a non-voting state. What are your plans to increase voter participation?
Well, I got one big idea, Jake. People say Alabama's 48th in this and 46th in that, 44th in other, but we've been a leading state in a lot of stuff, right? We are the place where the Civil Rights Act became real. Happened at Ollie's Barbecue right here in Birmingham, Alabama. If you never heard the story, go read Katzenbach versus McClung. All you viewers out there, I'm sure Jake knows about it, but I'm not going to tell the whole story now, although I tell it in my speeches a lot. But we made the Civil Rights Act real right here. We made mental health, the reform of mental health treatment in the world happened in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Why can't we lead the country with the following idea? Jake, do you know why we vote on Tuesdays?
Yes, because in the colonial era,
Mm-hmm.
it took generally from Monday to Tuesday for people to travel from the farm to the city to vote. That's why we
There
vote on
you
Tuesdays.
And they came on Tuesdays because it was market day. They had in New England, they had the markets. The farmers would come in on Monday, they'd get there and they'd have all day Tuesday to vote. Thus, what they were doing was voting on the day that was most convenient for the most people, right? But in a 21st century technocracy like the United States is today, Tuesday makes no sense. It's not the most convenient day for people to vote. The most convenient days for people to vote are Saturday and Sunday. It's the weekend. We should open our polling places at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning and close them at 8 p.m. on Saturday night, reopen them at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning, close them at 8 p.m. on Sunday night, give a 14-hour window on Saturday, another 14-hour window on Sunday. By federal law, we're required for a 12-hour window. We ought to expand that window. It ought to be 14 hours, and it ought to be 2 days. And there's nothing in federal law that says that the state of Alabama couldn't let it be 2 days. We should have an entire weekend. Jake, I've had people when I throw this idea out there on the campaign trail, I've had several of them say, "Well, Wayne, why are you closing 8 p.m. on Saturday night? Just leave them open all night. Let people wander in from the bars at 3 a.m. on Sunday morning to vote." I mean, that's fine with me. It would get a lot more people to vote. I believe that one simple idea would increase voter turnout by as much as 20%. Because right now we have so many people who just, Tuesday's hard for them, or they wake up that morning, they intend to vote. And then they have a meeting. Their boss calls them into a meeting, and you got to go on a service call, and oh my goodness, there's a baby's got to be delivered. All these different things that happen, and they don't make it to the polls. Where if we made the convenient days are Saturday and Sunday, just like Tuesday was the convenient day for people 250 years ago, it's not anymore. Now the convenient days of the weekend, we should be voting on the weekend. So that's my big idea, biggest
Aside,
idea.
aside from federal elections,
Mhm.
the state of Louisiana actually conducts its elections on Saturday.
100% true, and there are many places in the world where they do conduct the elections on weekend, but America's got that long-standing tradition. We just never have been willing to break with it, and we need to break with it. Now, there are other things you can do. Obviously, we need to make people more aware. We need to be spending more of the state's budget, Secretary of State budget, or anybody's budget, on informing people that elections are coming. Right now, Jake, me and you're sitting here. My election is a year away. It's a year and a week before I'm even going to be running. Me and because we're political junkies, right? When I go out and campaign, when I talk to regular people, different places, they're like, "Well, when is this election? Why are you already campaigning?" I'm like, "Because you got to, you got to start early." But they don't even realize when elections happen. I don't know, these folks. I'm sure they learned it years ago. I'm sure they've been to vote many times, but people just don't think about it. We need to spend more time focusing on when's the next election going to happen, educating people about when it's going to be, and make sure that more people get out to the polls. But I think the biggest thing we need to do is just make it easier for people to vote. And we need to have the early voting makes it easier for people to vote. Voting on the weekends makes it easier for people to vote. And of course, I'm a big believer in automatic voter registration. So,
Well, that's gonna knock out my next question.
oh,
Maybe
we'll talk about that now. Yeah.
maybe explain automatic voter registration to the viewers and how that works and how that would increase voter registration.
Absolutely. So voter registration right now, you have to you get your driver's license when you're 16. You have to register for the different things as you're growing up. But what we could do now, the way we could change this and make is when somebody comes in to get their driver's license, they're automatically registered to vote. Now, right now, federal law says that you have to be 18 years old to vote. Your viewers may not all know this, Jake, but you can actually register to vote when you turn 17 and a half. That's when you're allowed to start registering. We need to lower that down to 16. And we need to say when the individual comes in to get their driver's license, which we know the great majority, way over 90%, over 95% of Alabamians are going to come in and get that driver's license. Most of them between the time they turn 16 and the time they turn 17. So if we just take all those people and say, hey, we know when your 18th birthday is going to be, we know you're living in Alabama, let's register your vote right now. Now, Jake, here's the other big idea, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, because I've been out on the campaign trail a lot asking people this question: should we lower the voting age? And let me tell you, there's a big debate about this. It seems to me, and maybe I'm just wrong, but it seems to me that everybody asked that question who's over the age of 50 says, good Lord, no, you don't let them 16-year-olds vote. Anybody who's under the age of 30 immediately says, absolutely, yes. Those people should be able to vote. They're more mature than people were 18 when I was growing up. They should get to vote. And then I've had people between 30 and 50 here, they can kind of be persuaded either way. I've heard very strong arguments both ways, but I think there's a pretty strong argument, especially from young people, lowering the voting age to 17, lowering the voting age to 16. That's when they can drive. And 16-year-olds now know a lot more about the world than 16-year-olds did when I turned 16 back in 1978. And I'm at least open to the idea of lowering the voting age to 17 or even to 16.
So I'm in that middle range that you talked about. I'm 36.
Okay.
My birthday was 1 month and a day after the 2006 midterm elections.
Oh, man.
So the first election I got to vote in was a tax referendum in 2007. And then the first presidential election was 2008.
You got to vote for President Obama, yeah.
Yes, in the primary and in the general.
Yeah.
So I am open to the ideal of 16 and 17-year-olds being able to vote. I am of the opinion, mostly because at that age they can get a job and pay taxes. And
don't even have to have a work permit once you turn 17, right? And 16, you got to have a work permit, but still, I mean, those folks can work, they can pay taxes. Should they be able to vote? It's a pretty good argument.
They attend public schools that have school boards that face elections, and those candidates affect their daily lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I am open to the ideal. I have heard, obviously 16, 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds do immature things and do things we would wish they wouldn't do.
Right.
So I'm like you. I am open to the ideal. I am open to even looking at 17 being the age as opposed to 17. But I'm persuadable on this. I'm not, dead set, but I've also felt personally the effects of that 18,
So, Jake, I got to tell you my story real quick. So, I graduated high school. I was still 17. In my day, I was born in 1962, and I got to start school when I was 5. The cutoff date then was October 1st, not September 1st like it is now. My birthday's September 18th. So, I graduated high school. I was 17. I didn't turn 18 until I was already at Samford. And by the way, first person in my family ever get to go to college. I got a scholarship to come to Samford from Thomasville, Alabama, where I mostly grew up in a single wide trailer. And so when I got here, I was still 17 years old. Well, a lot of your viewers may not know, at that time, you had a board of registrars you had to go to in all the small counties. I was in Clark County, Alabama. The board of registrars, it was 3 sweet little ladies. There was one from Jackson, one from Grove Hill, one from Thomasville. And they met, I kid you not, Jake, they met one Tuesday night a month from 7 to 9 in the basement of the Clark County Courthouse. And you had to appear personally in front of them and register to vote. Now, I won't talk here too much about the fact that the white kids were told where to go and when to get there and how to register to vote, and the black kids were not. I mean, it was just a fact of life. So many African-American citizens at the time never got registered to vote because they didn't know how to do it. Nobody told them. I was told how to do it, but I was already at Samford. So when the 1980 election happened in November of 1980, I was not yet registered to vote and couldn't be because I had not been able to make it back to Grove Hill between September 18th when I turned 18 years old and that November election. And I've always maintained that Jimmy Carter would have won that election if I'd have been able to register to vote. But anyway, that may not be true, but
He might have won Alabama because Alabama was very close, and we may have avoided Jerome Denton.
Oh, there you go, man. Oh my goodness. Woo, Jeremiah Denton. Woo, goodness sakes. Voted the least effective senator of the 20th century, right?
Yes, there is a great clip on C-SPAN. It is Bill Ingram appearing on a Washington Journal back in 1985.
Oh wow.
And he is talking. They did a thing where they went to every state and they, discussed the local races. And he discusses that upcoming 1986 Senate
86,
race.
Dick Shelby. Uh-huh.
And he talks about how, Denton had a bumpy start to his Senate career, but
Yep.
it apparently turned it around by that point. And he said, I really don't think he'll face a challenge. He said, there's some rumblings that Representative Shelby may run as a Democrat, but I don't think he has much of a chance. Well, not only does Shelby run and win, he becomes the longest serving senator in Alabama
Well,
history.
in history, that is so great. That's so funny. Wow. I love that political junkie stuff, Jake.
Yes. And for those my viewers who don't know, Bill Ingram was the wizard of Alabama politics for many years.
Absolutely. In the 80s, if you wasn't reading Bill Ingram's column every week, you did not know what was going on in the state of Alabama politics. My grandmother read that column to me when I was a kid. So, yeah, my grandmother read that the Montgomery Advertiser from cover to cover every day when I was growing up, and she told me the exploits of Al Lapeer and Richard Mock and Joe Reed and folks like that. And then I grow up and I get to have lunch with those guys. That's very funny.
Would you rejoin ERIC, a system that has been highly effective at preventing voter fraud? The current Secretary of State, Wes Allen, pulled Alabama out of the system, citing debunked conspiracy theories.
100%. We've got to rejoin ERIC. Not being a part of ERIC actually subjects the state to more possibility of fraud than being a member of ERIC. I mean, what it does, it coordinates our voter registration with other states' voter registrations. So right now, somebody moves out of the state of Alabama, our internal system doesn't necessarily remove them. And it leaves more people on our voter rolls, and people on our voter rolls who are no longer living in Alabama are one of the most obvious methods for fraud in Alabama. Now, Jake, I think there's widespread fraud voting in Alabama. No, I don't. I don't believe there's a lot of widespread fraud. Is there some fraud? Probably is. And here's one way you can do it. And John Wall is a good example. He's the chair of the Alabama Republican Party. He does not have an Alabama ID, does not have a state issued ID. So what he does is he goes into his polling place and has two people there in the polling place who identify him, and that way he's able to vote. Well, if you know that somebody's moved out of the state and they vote in a different precinct than you, and you've got two people there that claim they know you, could you go vote at your precinct and then go over this other precinct, claim to be John Smith, and two people there say, yeah, that's John Smith, you can vote. And if we don't know the people that have moved out of the state, the people who have passed away, if we don't have the best information on that, it does in fact subject us to more potential voter fraud. So yes, we need to be back in ERIC, no question about it.
And more on John Wall, if that's his real name.
Yeah.
And if he's a real person.
Yeah.
And another thing, he served as a presidential elector in the state of Alabama in 2020. And there is real questions to whether or not he was a citizen of the state of Alabama at the time.
He was issued we know he had a state issued ID in Tennessee at the time. So that's a pretty interesting situation there.
My next question is one you kind of answered a little bit earlier about expanded polling hours, but so I'm going to pivot a little bit about a story that has emerged in the state of Alabama in the past few days. For those viewers who don't know, our Secretary of State, Wes Allen, has proposed as the cornerstone of his 2026 legislative agenda, because he's running for lieutenant governor and scared of A.J. McCarron.
That's right.
And Rick Pate, is this: that to hold a constitutional office in the state of Alabama, which can go down all the way to the circuit clerk level,
Yep, that's right.
that you have to be a natural born citizen of the state of Alabama. What's your position on this legislation?
Well, let's make this very clear. It is a racist proposal. I mean, I think that's the bottom line. This proposal, it's ridiculous, Jake. I mean, there's just it absolutely, and I have honestly, I have been meaning to get a press statement out to the folks, and I have been really busy. I mean, I'm executive assistant to the sheriff, and I've been in one meeting after another the last few days, actually governing the county. That's what we do, help govern the county. So, but I'm going to get a statement issued this weekend on this. There's just, this is silly. We allow naturalized citizens to fight for our country. We allow naturalized citizens to vote in our country. We allow naturalized citizens to pay taxes in our country. We allow them to do all sorts of things. Why should they not be able to serve in the same capacity that someone who is born in the United States? We have some people across this country who are wonderful public servants who have been born in other countries, and there is absolutely no reason that I can think of for this law except to try to impose a racist 150 years ago agenda on the people of Alabama.
And we would be the only state in the country with this requirement.
That's right.
It is I love this state. I believe it's a great place.
I've lived here for 63 years and a month. So there you go.
And I hate how politicians in this state, especially the elected leaders like Wes Allen, often play on the fears of Alabama voters. We've seen it from George Wallace after the 1958 primary.
That's right.
All the way to today.
To this week. That's right, Jake. And I mean, and Republicans often accuse folks like me of being radical. Democrats are all radicals. They're far left radicals. This is a radical proposal, Jake. I mean, I want people out there to understand this is not conservative in any fashion. This is not what conservatives do. Conservative does not mean racist. I have a lot of conservative friends. I have a lot of conservative family members. And this is not a conservative proposal. This is a radical proposal that would do something that has never been done before in any state in the United States. It's radical. It's far outside the norm, and it should not be the law of the state of Alabama.
So true. Would Alabama benefit from sending all registered voters a nonpartisan voter guide before each election?
Absolutely would. That's part of that publicity we were talking about earlier, Jake, trying to raise voter turnout. I mean, that's a lot of my goal as Secretary of State would be raising voter turnout. That's one of the stated goals of my campaign. We just have too many Alabamians who don't vote. And some of them don't vote because they don't think it's worth voting. Most of them, though, my belief is a lot of them vote because we make it too much trouble for them to vote. And we make it where they don't understand the candidates. And in many counties, Jake, as you know, there's only one candidate for a lot of the positions. And Democrats are trying very hard in 2026 to get people on the ballot. 22 statewide offices. We're going to try to fill all 22 of them before January when qualifying ends. Qualifying the 5th of January through the 23rd of January. We're going to try to fill all those positions, and we want to fill as many as we can in as many counties as we can so people have choices and will be more apt to vote. But mailing this voter guide, and we always have a voter guide here in Jefferson County. It's generally put out by Greater Birmingham Ministries. They'll do a voter guide. They'll interview all the local candidates and put a bio, something about them in there. But should there be a mandate for the Secretary of State's office to send one of those out to every voter in the state? Yes, absolutely, there should.
Especially on the constitutional questions.
So, Jake, in 2022, when we had 10 statewide constitutional amendments on the ballot, I was asked very early on by the sheriff to study those 10 amendments and to talk to people about them and say, here's and not make a recommendation, not say vote yes, not say vote no, just say here's what the amendments say, because they are so complicated. It takes a lawyer, it takes somebody. Now, I've been practicing law 37 years, and it took me a while to understand all 10 of them. And people need to know what these amendments are. Sometimes we pass amendments we really don't understand. They have consequences we really don't understand.
I agree with that. The only thing that I would suggest is this. On the yes or no explainers, allow groups who support each amendment to submit statements.
I like
Because,
that.
because if you get a question that could be a partisan question, you
Hmm.
could get the language construed by the Secretary of State's office, depending on their political affiliation,
Yep.
to muddy the water a little bit.
Yeah, and Jake, that to prove your point you just made, what Wes Allen's proposing with this natural born citizen thing, it's not legislation to do that. It's legislation to authorize a vote on a constitutional amendment that would do that, which is much more insidious because while a statute might be overturnable by a federal court, an amendment to the Alabama Constitution is much harder for a federal court to overturn. And that's what he's actually proposing, not a bill, but a constitutional amendment that would do that. Very radical stuff.
Would you certify Donald Trump as a candidate for president or vice president in 2028?
That's a violation of the U.S. Constitution, and no, I would not. I mean, he can't run, and he admitted himself yesterday. Of course, he had to go out the country to do it. He wouldn't say it while he was here in the United States. He had to tell the Chinese and the Japanese and the Koreans, that hey, no, I know I can't run in 2028. It's dead solid clear he can't run in 2028. I certainly don't expect him to try to run in 2028, but Steve Bannon wants him to. I mean, there's plenty of Republicans that are trying to get him to, and no, I mean, I don't believe any person who reads the Constitution of the United States in a very clear fashion could certify Donald Trump as a candidate. Yeah, there it is. That's the Constitution. Carry those around with me all the time. Yeah, that's he cannot run in 2028. And if the Republicans put him on the ballot, I mean, I'll be one of the people who'll be willing to be a plaintiff in a lawsuit to have him, not even be allowed on the ballot in the first place. But if I'm Secretary of State at that point, and somehow he gets past all those legal challenges, I just don't believe Secretary of State should certify him because it's clearly a violation of the American Constitution.
Speaking on a similar issue
Mhm.
that we may have to face here in the state of Alabama, do you believe evidence suggests that Tommy Tuberville has fulfilled the requirements to be governor of Alabama, the
I
residency?
I believe evidence is pretty clear that Tommy Tuberville has not fulfilled those requirements. But for those who don't know, running for Senate is very different than running for governor. The Senate it's a federal office, and Jake, one thing I know a lot of people don't know is members of Congress do not have to live in the district they represent because there's no constitutional requirement that they do, and there are in fact 15 members of Congress as we sit here today that don't live in the district they represent. And the federal Constitution gives nothing other than you have to live in this state to serve as a member of the Senate or a member of the House. You have to have been there for one day. And to go back to a Democratic thing that happened here, y'all may remember Hillary Clinton moved out of the White House, moved to New York City for a week, ran for Senate in New York City a week after she got there, and she was elected and she served as senator from New York. You can do that. You can't do that with governor. That is not the way it works. There's a constitutional amendment in the Alabama Constitution that says you have to prove residency in the state of Alabama for 7 years before you can become a candidate for governor. Liberally applying that rule, Tommy Tuberville would have to live in the state of Alabama from November 5th of 2019 up until the election occurs November 5th of 2026. I don't believe there's any way I can prove that. All of his logs from his Senate records show that when he flies home from Washington, D.C., he flies into Panama City. And he goes from Panama City to his $6 million beach house that sits on the beach down in Florida, and he lives in Florida. He doesn't come to Alabama. He gets a car service that picks him up at the airport and takes him to his house there in Florida. He does not live in Alabama. He has not lived in Alabama for many, many years. And I do not believe that he should be allowed to run for governor. Now, that said, it's kind of the Republican Party's decision. I know people can file lawsuits, but the way these challenges work, that's really a challenge to the candidate, and the challenge has to be filed after the individual qualifies. You've got 5 days to challenge a candidate after they qualify. So nobody can challenge Tuberville's residency right now. That challenge will occur in January. And the challenge will not be to a court. The challenge will be to the Alabama Republican Party. So they will hear it in the first instance. Now, if they rule that Tuberville can run because they say he lives in the state of Alabama, that can then be challenged in court. So we'll see what happens there, Jake. We really don't know. It'll largely depend on what judge draws it, what county it's filed in. There'll be multiple lawsuits filed, I assume, but we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But I believe there's strong evidence, and I believe that a Republican challenger could present strong evidence at a hearing presided over by John Wall, the guy we were talking about just a little while ago, who would appoint a committee to hear that challenge. And I believe that a challenger to him could present a very strong case that he does not live in the state of Alabama. And I have heard a few rumors to the effect that there are certain Republicans who are planning to file that challenge. And I will refrain from naming those Republicans, as I don't necessarily want them to be upset with me because I said their name on your show, Jake. But I have been told by some in the know Republicans that you can expect a challenge to be filed.
Well, we can only hope.
There you go, man.
Although Democrats have a strong slate of candidates running,
We do.
we have Dr. Will Boyd.
Yep, that's right.
Gentleman that's a pastor down in Montgomery that is running.
Yeah.
We have Mr. Martin, who
Yep,
is
Chick Martin. Yeah.
Chick Martin
From Ozark.
From Ozark, who was a business owner, and his business was affected by some actions of the legislature.
That's exactly, and still is every day. That's right.
So Wayne, where can voters find out more information about your campaign?
Well, they can find out more information about my campaign at Wayne Rogers for AL Secretary of State.com. That's our website. Also have a Facebook page that's just Wayne Rogers for Alabama Secretary of State. I've got a personal Facebook page too, it's Wayne Rogers. But then we've got on Instagram, you can find us at Wayne for Alabama. We don't have TikTok yet because I hadn't hired anybody young enough to know how to do it, but it's coming. It should be under Wayne for Alabama. And let me see. I showed Jake my T-shirt here a little earlier, y'all. You can see this right here. This is going to be one of our campaign themes, Mr. Rogers for Alabama, Secretary of State. And I asked people at my campaign kickoff the other night, Jake, to hashtag it Mr. Rogers for Secretary of State or Mr. Rogers for Alabama. So if you use that hashtag, you can certainly find us or search for that hashtag. And again, it's Wayne Rogers, Rogers. Now, Jake, I got to say something right here. 90% of the people named Rogers in the United States of America spell the name Rogers, not Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers screwed it up for the rest of us. People think we got a D in our name. Most of us don't. 90% of us literally don't. So it's Rogers, Wayne, Rogers for AL Secretary of State.com. That's the website.
And for our viewers in the 3rd Congressional District of Alabama, on Secretary of State, you can vote for a Rogers. But in the Congressional District, you need to vote for Mr. McGinnis against another Rogers.
That's right. And by the way, I get people ask me all the time, you related to Mike Rogers? Dear Lord, no. As far as I know, I think I told you a little earlier, Jake. There's been a whole lot of horse thieves and bad people in my family, and if your last name's Rogers and you're not either a direct descendant of mine, dead, or in jail, then I'm not related to you. So.
Well, I want to thank Wayne for coming on today.
Jake, thank you so much, man. It's been fun.
And talking about his important race for Secretary of State, the chief election officer in the state of Alabama,
right?
Chief record holder,
yes,
and an advocate for small business.
That's exactly. My wife is a small business owner. My stepdad was a small business owner. My granddad was a small business owner. My granddad was a union member later on in his life. And I have a lot of love for people who own and try to run small businesses in the state. And it's not easy to do. And we're going to try to make it easier for them.
And our primary in Alabama is May 19th.
Right. Thank goodness. It's the Tuesday before Memorial Day, Jake, not the Tuesday after Memorial Day. It's so much better. Hey, that's one thing we've been advocating for years. We should get more turnout then, too.
It's not going to be scalding hot.
Right.
That will be a benefit of it. Usually Alabama primaries are very hot.
Yep. It's a week earlier this year.
In more senses of the word than one. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you so much, Jake. Great to be with you, man.